Okay, it's 7:06 p.m. on April 4th, 2022. This is the public meeting for the Westchester County Rent Guidelines Board. I'll turn it over to you, Elsa.
Good evening, everybody. Very glad to see all of you, see that you're happy and healthy. And we have survived these 2 years and we're here. That's the good news. My name is Elsa Rubin, Chair of the Westchester Rent Guidelines Board. I welcome you to this virtual public meeting. This is our first public meeting to schedule our June public meetings and hearings dates. To determine rent adjustments for leases commencing or being renewed between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023. I will now take roll call. Please respond if you are present. Belén Aqua.
Present.
I'm going to skip Lamont because he has an excuse. Elliot Cherson.
Present.
Kenneth Finger.
Here.
Sylvia Hammer.
Present.
Evelyn Santiago.
Present.
Tamara Stewart.
Present.
And I'm Elsa Rubin, public member. And let the record show that we have a quorum. And now we will be discussing the dates in June for the next public meetings and hearings. But before we do that, I think that Peter has some announcements to make.
Okay, good evening again, everybody. It's good to see everyone. So I guess the big topic of conversation, aside from what the dates will be for the meetings, is the manner in which the dates should be held for this year. Without going into a long history lesson, at the time of the pandemic, due to an executive order, the requirement for the in-person meetings was suspended temporarily. That executive order was successively re-upped numerous times. And so eventually in September of last year, in the fall of last year, the executive orders lapsed and the legislature changed the public meetings law to allow for the type of teleconferencing that's been used to hold these meetings over the last 2 years until the emergency in New York ends. So there was some back and forth last month, and the governor extended the emergency covering these meetings for another month. She made it explicit at that point that this would be like the last shot for the teleconferencing type of meetings. So we don't know for sure, but the expectation is that after April 15th of this month, the meetings will revert back to the requirements that were there, prior to the pandemic, which, prior to the pandemic, all of the meetings were held in person. The public had the full opportunity to go to the locations in person, and to, be there in the same capacity as the board. There was limited ability for joining via, a teleconference, but there were some requirements that weren't existent throughout the pandemic, such as a board member advertising where they were going to be joining from and giving the public the opportunity to join the meeting from there. All of the boards throughout the state are grappling with what exactly to do in the event that the emergency is not extended past the middle of this month. The simple answer, and the one that it seems like the governor has suggested to the boards, would be to go back to in-person as was done prior to the pandemic. So I guess as you're going through and figuring out what to do with the dates this year, there should be a discussion about, how everyone wants to proceed, given what I've laid out here today with all of the changes to the executive orders, to the law, which are now likely, it seems, going to expire at the middle of this month.
Elsa,
Yes, Elliot.
from what you said, Peter, it sounds to me like there's no options.
Yeah.
Assuming that the order is not extended, the only option is live pre-COVID hearings. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yep. So it would be my recommendation that the board plan for that eventuality here tonight, and to come up with dates and places for where the board would want to have these meetings. And then if the law is changed over the next couple of months, then the board can make a decision at that point what they want to do. But once April 15th of this month passes, it certainly looks like the requirements that were there prior to the pandemic are going to go back into full force and effect by the time the June meetings roll around.
So I have another
That-
question.
Yes, Elliot.
Another, similar to what the courts are doing, which is basically a hybrid. You have personal appearances, and there's also the opportunity to have virtual appearances. Do you have any idea if it will be possible? For example, just as an example, Tamara can't make meeting number 1. Will she be able to appear by virtual with the rest of the board appearing personally? So in other words, can somebody sign in remotely and participate?
A hybrid meeting, right?
Yeah, hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, the public
That's what the
office.
courts are doing.
Yeah. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be a little bit more guidance on this when the emergency actually does expire. In fact, this did come up in passing at the New York City Rent Guidelines Board's recent meeting, which was last week. And unfortunately, they put the issue off until their meeting on the 13th, I believe it is. So we may get a better sense for what their interpretation is after that point. But the public officers law does allow for, joining via teleconference in some capacity. But as I mentioned, there are requirements that need to be met in the public notice in that eventuality, one of which being publishing where that board member is going to be joining from, giving the public the opportunity to join from there. So it's not a extremely flexible situation. And also there's requirements that the teleconferencing be available to the public in that eventuality. And as I'm sure everyone remembers, prior to the pandemic, we didn't have the teleconferencing set up and rolling throughout these meetings. So that would be kind of a heavy lift for us as the staff providing the support to be able to do that. So it simplifies everything if the board goes back to the full in-person as was done previously. There may be the ability for some people to join via teleconference if absolutely necessary, but we'd have to figure out exactly what the mechanics would be on that. And I don't think we're set up to do that at the present.
Did you say that we would have to publish where we're calling in from?
Yes.
And that the public would be available to come to that location?
Yeah, in other words, they could go to your house or come to my house.
That's exactly my question.
That's
exactly
correct.
my question.
That is correct.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, I don't want that.
I'm turning off the lights.
Yes, Berlin.
Yeah, previously we've had options. I'm not sure if it's probably with our meetings, as opposed to the hearings, where we've had opportunities to attend teleconference, right? I mean, I've done that before. I mean, if it's a meeting. So would there be a difference?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I can only speak to my time with the board. I don't recall people joining, I guess the 100% proper way. through that sort of means. And there has been interpretation that there's really no differentiation between a meeting and a hearing and the requirement to comply with the public officers law. So that may be
Yeah,
something that they do if the emergency expires, but as of right now, that's not anything that I'm aware of.
yeah, I'm sorry,
It's okay.
Elsa.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I had to travel. I was away at a conference in LA a few years ago. And I actually joined well, it was arranged that I was able to join the meeting. So that's why I'm bringing that up.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's still probably could be a possibility if someone had to be, not not physically be at the meeting. Let's put it
Yeah,
that
you
way.
said it. You said it had to be arranged. I guess I would wonder whether whoever was arranging it arranged it so that in the public notice they told everyone where you were and
Right.
that they had the ability to go to LA to join the meeting if they so chose.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure, Evelyn. I can't speak to that, but
Right.
I'm not aware of any. It's pretty strict, the law as it's written, and that's why there's been a lot of conversation about whether it should be changed at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Tamara.
So it sounds to me like we're going to go back to in-person, and we'll be going back to having 3 public hearings in different locations, in addition to our stats meeting and our meeting where we're doing the rebuttals and the vote, correct?
Well, I think we can decide on that.
Sure, I just
Last
wonder-
year, we only had 2 public meetings, correct, Peter?
Yeah, and Chair, I just want to recognize that Eddie Mae Barnes has just joined the meeting as well.
Here she is.
But you're correct, Chair. Last year, there were 2 public hearings. There was a research meeting, and then there was a presentation meeting, and then a separate meeting for rebuttals and guideline votes. So there was some conversation at the scheduling meeting last year about whether the board had to hold X amount of public hearings, and the answer was no, there's no requirement of that. It was something that was historically done so that the different municipalities were reached.
Well, the reason we did 3 public hearings in the past, it was because we wanted to be at different locations and reach out to different neighborhoods. We did it in Mount Vernon, in Yonkers, and New Rochelle. And sometimes we did it in White Plains too. So if we are not going to have the option of being hybrid, then we might have to go to that format.
Yeah, and Chair, I mean, the number of meetings and what's done at the meetings is always, the purview of the board. There's no real requirement, of X amount of public hearings or that even presentations be made under the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. So it's really up to the board how they want to structure the meetings, when they want to hold them. And it's my job to schedule them with the municipalities and arrange for the public notice. So.
Okay, so with that said, does anybody else have any other opinion? Yes, Belen.
Yes. So I don't know. I'm thinking that I don't know. I guess Peter or someone could present to the legislative body that that we would, I don't know if we vote on it, I'm not sure, but we would like some form of a hybrid option, if that's possible to present. Because I think that, yeah, it would be less restrictive that, someone has to be physically there in case they can't be, and they can still join. So is that something that can be presented, do you think, Peter?
Well, Beleen, what I can say to that is it would be a drop in the bucket. This is a conversation that's being had throughout the state, and every board is grappling with how to deal with the future, especially given that we are in a little bit of a state of uncertainty. We've been, since the law was changed in January of this year, it's kind of been month by month, seeing is the emergency going to be extended each month. So, I don't know who I would be presenting it to, but whoever it would be that would, be receiving that presentation has probably already heard it from a ton of boards throughout the state.
It's not just guideline boards either. It's every kind of municipal board or mixed board. So I know that in Rockland next week, I'm going to be having the same conversation that we're having here tonight. I think part of it is just figuring out, if it gets extended and you can do remote, that's great. But as you know, it takes a bit of time for staff to be able to arrange locations. And given the uncertainty of COVID, I know Peter has already started making phone calls, and a lot of places that used to hold a large number of people are only going to allow a third to a half in there. So if the board doesn't figure out how they want to do this, we might be locked out of any kinds of places that we can actually have them in person, if that's what the board is required to do.
So with that said, yes, Evelyn.
I have a question. So if we were to do a hybrid kind of presentation, would that be also for the public? In other words, would we have to extend the option for the public to participate online as well as in person?
Yeah, so the law pretty much says if somebody's joining via teleconferencing, we have to make that available, whatever that feed is, what have you, available for the public to join by that as well. And some of that is also stuff that I think would become clearer, after the emergency ends, as far as what the responsibilities are of the boards. Because as far as my research is, there's not a lot of cases that have come down, just hammering out the details of all of this stuff. But I expect that once the emergency does end, we're going to get a lot of interpretations as to how the boards need to deal with the situation. So again, I will say that the simplest way to deal with it is to revert back to how the board historically had done things.
I agree. I agree with Peter. I think that we should do the scheduling tonight, as if we were going to go live in public, so that he and his staff have the opportunity to book the places where we want to go. And if we get lucky and they said, okay, no, you can do it remotely, then we can cancel. But we should have that in place tonight. Yes,
Peter?
Billy.
I agree. Yeah.
Yes, Ken.
Peter, are we going to get the data from the state any earlier than in the past?
So Ken, Tamara did send an email a couple of weeks ago. I did hear from the director of the research unit, and he was saying June 9th is the target date for them. That's the date that we had the meeting last year as well. This year, there is a change to the open meetings law for when we have to make anything that the board is going to be looking at available prior to a meeting. So whenever you decide to hold the research meeting, and the director has said June 9th is the earliest that he expects to have be able to present to the board. Within 24 hours before that, we need to make sure that all of that research documentation is on the website available to the public. But
So does that mean that we can't have a meeting before then, as we did in the past?
so they're saying that the earliest they can do the presentation is June 9th, which is
Okay, but we could have a meeting on the 1st, for example, right?
You're saying a public hearing, Ken?
Yeah, public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what historically
Okay.
the board had done, so I don't see a reason why you couldn't do that now.
Okay, no, I just wanted to be clarified. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the research information wouldn't be available to the public or the board for, prior to that meeting necessarily, but there's nothing stopping the board from having them as you did in the past prior to the research meeting as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so should we start talking about dates and places?
Well, I'll give you my first 3-4 dates. May 31st, June 1st.
One minute, Ken.
Yeah.
Elliot has something to say.
I just have a
I'm sorry.
question. Before we start picking dates, I think we need to determine how many meetings we're going to have,
Right.
public meetings. I think it was last year we had 2, didn't we? Am I
Two,
correct?
yes.
2. And part of the reason for that, as I recall, was a paucity of witnesses. It was, we just didn't seem like there was a real a need from the public to address the board. With live meetings, will that change? I mean, I have no idea. But it seems to me that the 2 meetings are probably sufficient. And then, of course, we'll have our meeting with the DHCR representatives. And then have 2 public meetings, the meeting with at the office, and then, of course, the vote or the presentations, rebuttal, and vote, which are 2 more meetings.
Yes,
So that would be a total of what, 5?
5.
5.
Okay, yeah,
Including the meeting at the office with DHCR.
right.
Yes, Tamara?
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry.
Hi, Eddie Mae, how are you?
I'm okay.
All right. Well, I would respectfully suggest that, given that one of the observations that was made the last 2 years when we were doing the meetings virtually was that there was very low tenant participation. And a good part of that had to do with the fact that for many tenants, it was an added burden for them to try to participate through the technology. Before we dispense with a 3rd meeting, when people are only finally just having an opportunity to return to business as usual, I think it would be premature to assume that there's not going to be sufficient in-person appearance time. Plus, if we're also looking at venues that may limit how many people they will allow, then it probably is important that we do have the 3 meetings, the 3 public hearings as opposed to the 2, so that we don't end up with too many people appearing at too few public hearings because people are finally allowed to come in person to testify.
Anybody else has an opinion about that? Yes, Belen.
Yeah, I do agree with Ms. Stewart on that. I would like to see more public hearings opened to the public, especially since, like, we said we're talking about COVID and people haven't had the opportunity to come out and voice their opinions, voice their say. I think it would be good for us to be able to allow that to happen if we are having, in-person meetings.
Just a point on the capacity that I think April had mentioned. I have called 2 municipalities in the Yonkers Public Library. The only one that had any cap on how many people would be able to attend was the Yonkers Library, and that would be a room with up to 60 people. So I think, that would not really be too much of an obstacle, just to clarify that point a little bit.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yes, Sylvia.
Peter, have you reached out to also New Rochelle and Mount Vernon or just Yonkers?
Hi, Sylvia. I reached out to Yonkers. I reached out to White Plains, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle. As of this afternoon, the only municipality that had gotten back to me was White Plains, so I'm still waiting to hear from New Rochelle and Mount Vernon.
Okay, thank you.
So is White Plains available?
Yes, White Plains is available, but they have just asked me to get them the dates the board would want to use the council chambers as soon as possible so that they can mark it off their calendar, so to speak.
And how many people can they hold in White Plains? Did they give you the capacity there?
I don't know that, Sylvia. All I know is that they don't have any cap limit.
Okay,
And, the board has held public hearings there previously, and it's been large enough for their purposes.
Mhm. Thank you.
So I think we should vote on who wants to have two public hearings and who wants three. What do you think, Peter?
Well,
Second,
yeah, I
I
mean,
second that.
you know, the board can take a vote on that if they want. They need a motion and a second, obviously, though, and then I can take the roll.
Okay,
So it probably makes sense to actually have a motion for two public hearings as opposed to three, or vice versa, for somebody to make that.
Okay,
Tamara, you
so
want to make that motion?
I'll make,
Or Velin?
yeah, I'll make a motion for 3 public hearings.
Second?
I second.
Okay.
Like me to call the roll, Chair?
Yes, please.
So this is just to restate a motion to hold 3 public hearings as opposed to 2. Motion was made by Valeen, seconded by Tamara. Sylvia Hamer,
I agree.
Tamara Stewart,
Yes.
Eddie Mae Barnes,
Yes,
Evelyn Santiago,
Yes.
Elliot Cherson,
It's kind of moot. I abstain.
okay, Ken Finger,
Yes,
Lamont is not here, Pauline Aqua,
Yes,
and Elsa Rubin.
Yes.
So that carried by a vote of almost the entire board, 7 with 1 abstaining and
I'll change my vote to yes.
okay, so that carried by unanimous support of the members in attendance at this meeting. So the board has voted to hold 3 public hearings as opposed to 2.
And now we have to find the locations.
It's worth reminding the board that in 2019, the last time that the board met in person, at that point, there were 3 public hearings, and then the presentations were originally tacked on to the last public hearing. But given the number of people who showed up at that hearing, the board voted to change it, and then the presentations were given on the night of the guidelines vote. So in other words, there wasn't a separate meeting for just presentations.
So the presentations were together with,
The presentations were originally tacked on to the last public hearing, so it was a combined meeting. But if you remember, it lasted several hours, so the board voted to move that and have the presentations given on the same night as the vote meeting.
I have no
so,
objection to that.
So that would be a total of 4 meetings?
3, 4.
It would be,
Oh, because 5, because the rebuttals
5, no?
and the final vote.
Mm.
Do we need a week, do we need a delay between the presentation and the rebuttal?
Yes,
Mhm.
there needs to be time for people to take in what's presented before we actually have a vote. And then if there's a need for a rebuttal or some sort of a response, there needs to be time to think about that. That didn't work out very well that night, as I recall it. That, you know, the testimony went on for several hours, which we didn't expect, although given that HSTPA had just passed, perhaps we should have. But we didn't, you know, we didn't know it was going to happen when it did. But having presentations on their own night seems to work out fairly well. I don't have a problem with combining the rebuttal and the vote on the same night.
Then we're talking about more meetings,
6 meetings, that would be.
6.
Which is traditionally what we had.
No, we had the vote when we had the rebuttals.
Yeah, that's what Tamara said.
That's what she suggested.
Yeah, that's what she suggested,
Right.
to have the rebuttals and the vote on the same night.
Correct.
Mhm.
So I don't think we need the time between the rebuttal and the presentation, but if you all feel that's necessary, I don't feel that strongly about it.
Personally, I would like to be able to go over the material and to, you know, to just to look at everything, all the aspects, than being rushing that same night
I agree.
to
Mhm.
make a decision.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with that, because it does feel rushed. It does, when we do everything so sort of hurriedly. So I would like, it's a lot of material, and I think it's a good sort of a break point that we can all take a look at everything without feeling so rushed to make, to vote.
I
Yeah.
also agree because I think it gives us time to process the information
Mhm.
so that we can make a more informed decision when we vote.
And Ken,
I would agree
that's
with
what-
that as well. Yes,
Ken,
because it would be
That's what-
fair to the
Oh, sorry.
owners as well as,
Yeah, it's fair to everyone. Mhm.
so I was going to say, Ken, that's what we did the last time, I think. We did the rebuttals and the vote on the same night. Correct?
Mhm.
But we had less, and as I said before, we had less meetings because people didn't have to be in a specific physical location. They could join from anywhere. That's why we only had 2 public hearings, because there was no need for anybody to be in a certain place. But now we have decided to have 3 public hearings. The next step will be to decide what the other meetings are going to be. We have
Did you-
the
Excuse me,
presentation.
Elsa?
Yes,
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think in the past, we usually decided on the dates first, and then Peter checked with the municipalities for availability on those dates, as opposed to picking the well, somewhere along the way. But usually, at least White Plains, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and New Rochelle were included somewhere among the lineup of municipalities, whether some of them were for public hearings, other ones might be for the presentation or for the vote itself, et cetera, to make sure we at least covered the 4 big cities. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct. That's the way we did it.
Okay.
So then we will need 4 locations.
But we were, no, 3 locations. We left out New Rochelle, I think, the last time because we never really get any participation in the years we were in New Rochelle.
I would strongly suspect that given that we now have a tenant rep from New Rochelle, that there will be some participation from New Rochelle if we have
No pressure,
a public hearing
Sylvia.
there.
No pressure.
Thank you, Tamara.
But if I
Then have
recall
we-
correctly, in the White Plains meeting, we had a large we had a lot of people show up for that as well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
there were people in Mount Vernon, a lot of people in Yonkers.
Mhm.
So why don't we have the vote?
Yeah, no, actually, I remember quite a few people came out for one of the New Rochelle meetings. And that's my college town, so I actually recognize some of the folks who actually teach at Iona. So
Why
that
don't
was
we
really
have,
great.
why don't we have the presentations in White Plains and the 3 hearings where people come to New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, and Yonkers?
That's a good idea.
Mhm.
We
I would
just-
second that.
That's
I
what
would go for that.
I
Sounds
would
good to
support
me.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that
You need a
idea.
motion for that, Peter?
No, it sounds like there's unanimous agreement on that one. So Ken, that was Mount Vernon public hearing, New Rochelle public hearing, Yonkers public hearing, and then the presentation in White Plains and
And the vote in White Plains.
vote in White Plains.
Okay. So all we need now are the dates. Ken, you wanted to give dates?
Yeah, I'd like to start off the first couple with the 31st of May, 1st of June, and the 8th of June. For the first 2 of those 3 days.
I would like to go further into
All right,
June.
I'm okay. I'll give you the rest of my days that I'm available. I'm available the 13th, the 14th, the 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 27th.
Those are good dates?
Those are all my good dates.
I'm sorry, Ken, after the 14th, what were the other dates?
20th, 21st, 22nd, and 27th.
13, 14, 20, 21, 22, 27.
Right, and start off with May 31st, June 1st, and June 8th.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yes,
Since we already know that the final meeting is going to be in White Plains, why don't we start with that date and work our way back? Because that's where we all have to end up, right?
Fine with me, however you want to do it.
that's fine.
I have a lot of annual meetings that month.
So,
Can I just ask Ken a clarifying question? Because the 9th is not on your list. Does that mean you're not available for the stats meeting, sir?
No, it said it couldn't be any earlier than the 9th, but that's not on my list. That's correct. I might be, that's a Thursday night. I might be available that night, but right now it's a question mark. So I could,
Where,
if you want to make the staff meeting the 9th, that's okay with me.
So just to clarify on that, the 9th was the absolute earliest. They said they could do it. So if you were to do it on the 13th, then, we would be pushing them to still have the report issued as if you were to have it on the 9th. And then, I guess the board would have it over the weekend, but
That'd be good with me.
drop dead date, the 13th or any of those later dates would work. The 9th was just the earliest they had available.
Is that
Well, I
okay for
would
the
prefer the
13th?
13th forward.
13th is fine with me.
If we do the
What,
staff
for the stats meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I had written down the 9th, given what Peter's response was.
yeah, but you just heard him.
Right, but that,
What
that's not
he had said in the email, Ken, in the email, he had said that they had pretty much confirmed the 9th for the stats meeting.
Well, if it helps to, resolve the deadlock, I guess, the research team, given the requirements of the law that require them to provide the research 24 hours in advance of the meeting, they did ask if possible to have it later than their earliest possible date. So they haven't set anything in stone. They said they could do the 9th. Their preference would be, of course, to do it later. So it's up to the board what date they want to do.
So why can't we do the staff meeting the 13th? Then you work backwards. The 27th is the vote. 22nd would be what, the presentations, right?
Right, yes.
And then you have 1, 2, 3 dates for Yonkers, New Rochelle, and Mount Vernon.
14th, 20th, and 21st.
yes, I would rather do it. I don't want to start in May or early June.
Neither do I.
I would
Yeah.
rather,
How about the 8th?
No.
No?
What's wrong
Okay.
with Kenny? If we start the 13th with the staff, then 14, 20, 21 are the 3 localities.
Okay,
yeah,
Presentation 22nd and the vote the 27th.
obviously, I'm good with those. I said I'd be good at
Yeah.
that.
So stop objecting to it.
All right, so what I can tell you out of the dates that I have available, the ones that match, let's start off with what matches. The 27th for the rebuttal and vote is fine.
Fine with me also.
The
Yes.
22nd for the
Can we-
presentations is.
Tamara, can we,
Sorry.
can we start from the 27th, and everybody who is available on that day, raise your hand. Okay, so 27 is good.
Okay,
Uh,
June.
for rebuttal and vote.
Correct. What about the 22nd, the 2-2 for the presentations? Are people available for that?
I'm available.
Are you available,
for-
Ellen? The 22nd?
At this point, I really don't, I'm not tied into anything for
Yeah.
June, so I'm pretty
Yeah.
much with the open.
Same here.
All right, 21st.
The 20th for a
Well, let's
public
go backwards.
hearing?
Wait.
21. Let's go
The
with
21st,
21st, this next
All
day.
right,
Public hearing.
well,
public
if
hearing.
a choice between, I could go either the 20th or the 21st for a public hearing, one
do
or the
both?
other.
Can you do both tomorrow? No?
No,
You can't do both?
I'm not available for both. I'm not available for 3 meetings that week.
Are you available on the 14th?
Yes, I could do this. I could do the 14th.
The 14th and the 21st or the 20th, correct?
Correct.
And then in between, we will have, but then
All right,
Ken is not available.
make it another day, and I just won't come to one of the meetings. That's all.
Does, I mean, if there's a choice for people between the 20th and the 21st, that's fine. I could,
16th?
hmm?
How about the 16th?
16th?
Thursday, the 16th?
Yep. Anybody
That's
who's
not
available?
good for me.
Are you available
Wait a
the
minute.
16th, Tamara?
It's not good for me either.
No, and that
16th is-
week, that's the week where the crazy library people have their committee meetings, the board meeting, the work. That week So I know the most that I could do that week would be one meeting, so that would be the 14th. And then I could, the week before that, I could do, if we were interested, I was looking at the 7th, or since Ken said the 8th.
I would
I
prefer
could-
not to start until the 13th.
For a public hearing?
For all the meetings, the 13th forward. In other words, I would not like to do them the first 2 weeks of June.
All right, so you're talking about a public hearing on the 3rd. So either the 13th or the 14th, I could do.
Staff meeting the 13th and a public hearing the 14th, a public hearing the 21st. We need one more.
Yeah, we need something between the 14th and the 24th, the
Right.
21st. We need
All
a
right,
public
so-
hearing there.
So you're looking at the 13th and the 14th.
And
Yes.
I don't think we want 3 days in a row. Oh, no, I'm
How
sorry.
about the
Excuse
16th?
me, I have meetings every night this week. So you can't
Which
give
week?
me any more meetings that week. I'm meeting out that week.
Yes, Berlin? You muted. You're muted.
Sorry
Oh,
about that.
okay.
Yeah. No, yeah, that'll be a bit much for me, 3 in 1 week. I'm probably going to have some presentations and meetings to attend as well, so I will be able to block off 3 days.
Okay, so right now we're missing one, we need one more date.
So wait, so the 13th is stats, right?
Yes,
So the 13th is stats. Then we have public hearing number 1 on the 14th.
the 14th.
And then we looking at a public hearing on
The 21st or the 20th.
21st.
the 20th or the 21st.
No, it's the 21st and the 22nd, I thought.
The
No,
presentations are on the 22nd.
presentation.
Okay.
And the public hearing is the 21st. And you can't do tomorrow, you can't do the 20th.
That means
You're
3 in a
talking about
21,
3 days
21, 22.
in the same week.
Yes.
Yeah, I
That's a
can't do
lot.
that.
That's a
And
lot,
other
yeah.
people are saying that's a lot, Ken.
That's
Yeah.
a lot, yeah.
If I could resurrect a idea I floated earlier tonight, given the scheduling issues, if I were to, I don't know. I mean, it seemed like the public hearing and the presentations were a lot when it was in Yonkers. The board could always consider one of the less populous counties having a public hearing prior to the presentations, given that, you're looking at the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. You're already having a presentation meeting on the 22nd, which will be open to the public. I know that was mentioned to be in White Plains. You could always put the public hearing before that and eliminate one of the meetings. It wouldn't violate the 3 public hearing vote that the board took earlier tonight. It's just a suggestion.
Well,
So
Can
have
I-
a public hearing and the presentation on the 22nd.
Right, good idea.
That's okay with me.
I would like to ask, I can appreciate what Elliot is saying about wanting to start the 13th. But part of the reason that we're ending up being squeezed is because of this trying to put it in the last 2 weeks. If we had a public hearing, let's say on the week of the 6th, then we wouldn't have an issue with trying to do 2 things on the same night.
But why not? Peter's idea is to do 2 things on the same night. What's the downside of that?
If it turns out like what happened before, where we got a lot of participation and then we had a couple of hours of people wanting to testify, and I think that that's really important that we hear from the public and hear what they have to say, then we're being pushed in terms of the presentations, and when people are tired and, it's hard to maintain attention simply because we're not even considering having anything for the first week and a half of the month.
Well, I would have no problem with then, let's say the 9th, just using that
No,
as.
the eighth,
The
Elliot.
Hopefully, I mean, I may not be able to be there, but I would hope that by then I would be able to appear virtually, at least listen and maybe not participate, but be able to observe the whole public hearing.
Okay,
So can we do the eighth then?
the 8th?
Yeah, I can make it the eighth. I cannot make it.
Okay,
cannot
and
make it the
everybody who's available on the 8th, please raise your hand.
I don't know.
I have something planned. I have a trip earlier in the day and I'm getting back at 6 o'clock, but if I'm delayed, I'll be late. I'll be late.
Eddie May, are you
Okay.
available on the 8th? Hello?
I'm okay with the 8th.
Yeah. Belen?
Yeah, I would say the 8th or the 9th.
Yeah.
I know there's some discussions there, but yeah, the 8th. But I do think it's important. I'm feeling it's important that we should have an earlier meeting during that month. Yes, in June.
Okay, so
Earlier than the
everybody's
8th?
available.
No.
No,
That
no,
within that
before the
week.
13th.
Within that week. No, I mean within that week. Yes.
So just
Elliot,
be aware
you're
that
the only one
I'll
who's
be
not
there, but
available.
I'll be late. If
Okay,
that's okay.
and
All right.
Elliot might not be there or will
Yeah,
not be there.
And
Okay,
I might
well.
not, and maybe if I can't physically be there, hopefully I could appear virtually.
Okay,
And that'll have to be determined at a later date.
so are we all fine with the 8th? For
So
the
far.
first public
Yes.
meeting?
I'm good as long as you
Okay.
understand I'm late. I'll be late.
Yes, okay.
All right, so we have the eighth for the first public hearing. We have the
Meeting.
13th.
Public meeting.
It'll be a
meeting?
public hearing.
The public hearing.
Is that the
Public
hearing?
Oh,
or the meeting?
hearing, okay.
It's the hearing.
We have the 13th for the staff. We have the 14th, 21st for public hearings. We have the 22nd for presentations and the 27th for rebuttal and vote.
Yes,
Mhm.
All right, I move those dates be the official dates of the guidelines board for 2022.
Let me just recap them.
Recap, please. Yes.
Public hearings will be held on June 8th, June
Mhm.
14th, and June 21st. Research meeting on June 13th. And the presentations on June 22nd. And the rebuttal and vote on June 27th.
And I assume this is all contingent upon Peter being able to
Find
obtain
location.
a
The
location.
locations for those dates.
Yeah, I'll start working tomorrow morning on securing the rooms for these. And I think based on my early conversations, it won't be an issue. I'll just need a little bit of room to work with as far as figuring out which places for which public hearing. But I understand the board wants public hearings in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle, and then the final 2 meetings in White Plains. Is that right?
correct.
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay.
Great.
That it?
Anything else?
Move to adjourn?
Anybody else has any comment? No?
No.
Okay,
Thank you all for.
All right,
being
I'll
so
second.
flexible.
I move
Ken-
to adjourn.
Ken moves to adjourn, Eddie made seconds.
Okay.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have
a good
everybody.
night.
On June
Stay well.
8th.
I'm not sure.